Well, here we are at the wedding, at the contracting of marriage between two lawyers. And I think that's a joke in itself, so I have nothing more coming. But it does beg the question about the nature of law. And laws exist as universally held principles to uphold, to preserve this notion of justice. Justice is a universal concept in every culture. How it's protected, how it's applied, what its ramifications are, is slightly different and based on convention. But the notion that justice exists, that there is a right order, that there are proprieties in relationships, that goes virtually uncontested. And so here we are, as you're about to enter into what the church calls the contract of marriage. Now, there's no bill of goods, as it were, there's no dowries, there's no land acquisitions or uniting of kingdoms, but there is uniting of hearts. The word law is lex in Latin, and the word justice is jus, J-U-S or I-U-S, depending on which century you're in. And this notion of justice, it gets translated into English as both a right and a duty. The Latin word for justice is also translated into right and duty, that I have a right to something, I lay claim to something. And a duty, I must put forward something. Why? For the sake of justice. To enter into right relationship with the beloved of my heart. And from this, aside from God, among the most important relationships in my life, flows this community of love, which is the very place in which God designed children to exist. Let's back up to the beginning, Genesis. You have God who creates everything, and then is given permission for Adam to name everything, which means he sees into the essence of something, an animal, a deer, whatever, and he calls it by its name. Having seen the whole creation, he's left unsatisfied. And God says to himself, it's not good for man to be alone. And then when Eve comes on the scene, Adam is satisfied. At last, bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Here is a creature who has the capacity to love me not only in the way that I want to be loved, but in the way that I need to be loved, in a way that satisfies. Tiffany, I know less about your story. James, I know a little bit more about yours. All I care to share is you've done plenty of searching. And here you are at this moment of aha. Here at last is one with the capacity to love me. Here at last is one created by God for my good. And I take her not for selfish motives, not for my own sake, for my own gain, or merely that, but rather for a noble purpose, to enter into the life of intimacy of holy matrimony, to enter into the joys and pains of marriage, to enter into a special type of relationship that will call more out of you than anything else on the face of this earth. that the love that you purport to have and ask to be blessed by God will demand more from your will than anything else if you're doing it right. And the demand on your will transform you to live in a more godly way. That you might not live just for yourself or just two people doing joint tax filing and sharing a home because it's more efficient that way, but to live in a type of relationship of mutual love, of appreciation, of honoring. I would be remiss if we had the wedding of two lawyers and I didn't read from canon law. So here's how the church defines marriage. The matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership. That's straight from the book of Genesis. That you're given a mission to be fruitful and multiply. That doesn't just mean have children. To be fruitful is to have an air of hospitality about you, to have the joys of the Christian life, to know and love our Lord Jesus, and to allow that to radiate in a world that does not even know what Jesus is about. They take on a partnership of the whole life, and which is ordered by its nature to the good of the spouses. Love wills the good of the other as other. It is not self-interested. Ordered to the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of children. And this contract of marriage has been raised by the Lord to the dignity of a sacrament between the baptized. Thus, holy matrimony is not just a contract at which point it can be broken or voided. It is a covenant. A contract is an exchange of goods or services. A covenant is a gift of persons. And so here you enter into this total self-gift of holy matrimony. But you do so, you take on a risk to yourself. Because you are both sinners and you're both flawed. But the beauty of what you're about to do in the exchanging of your vows is not to say, we're going to say these words because we have the capacity to live them out perfectly. No. We don't need to earn our salvation. We are saved by our faith in Jesus and the ramifications of walking with him. And when you say, I do, when you promise to love and honor each other, you create this concrete moment in your life witnessed by those who love you, so that when you fail in the small things, when you are unfaithful in the heart or in your actions, when you are unkind, when you are impatient, when you are pompous and jealous and everything that's opposite of the second reading in Corinthians, you can have a place to go back to and say, oh, I need to live a different way. Will you help me? And thus, James, your love of Tiffany will transform you by the grace of God. And thus, Tiffany, your love of James will transform you and make you able to live the sweetness of heaven here on earth if you allow yourself to be transformed by his grace and not merely your own will. You supply your will here and now through consent and through the begging of God's grace. And the Lord takes those seeds of your will and he allows them to be transformed into something magnanimous beyond measure. And when you bring a child into this world, you will forever change the course of eternity by the conception of but one single child. And as many as the Lord gives you, the safety of your unified hearts and the intimacy of your home life is supposed to be the safest place for them to be brought up to figure out what reality is. And then they shall know who God is. They shall know what forgiveness is. They shall know what it means to live at peace in a conflicted world. This is your partnership. This is your mission. This is what the Lord entrusts to you this day. And so if indeed you are willing and ready to enter into this contract, this covenant of holy matrimony, I invite the wedding party to please come forward.